I'm half Navajo and half Mexican. For over 20 years of my life, I've lived on the Navajo Nation reservation. The Native American side of my family always warned us to be careful at nighttime. My grandparents would always tell me stories of these shape-shifting witches that can curse you, kill you, or just mess with you. They called them skinwalkers. They called them this because they would take the skin of dead animals and wear them to change into the shape of that animal or something in between a human and animal. Not like a typical werewolf, though. I never believed in it, really. I'm only half Navajo and very light-skinned, so I was never treated the same by most of the people here. I drifted away from the culture and thought it wasn't for me. It was around summertime when this happened. I was in high school. It was about 6 to 8 years ago. I was around 15 or 16. I used to hang out with a group of guys who liked to do a lot of delinquent type stuff. You know, smoke cigarettes, stay up all night. The guys who always come over to somebody's house to play video games, and then at 3 a.m. if we felt like it, we'd go sneak out to Paradise. I know it's ironic, the name. It's basically a giant metal pipe that carries irrigation water to all the farms in the area, but it was also a spot for kids to get drunk or high in the evenings. However, the place did have a scary history of kids and adults who drowned or died in the night, but I always thought those were just urban legends. But at 3 a.m., that was our time that we as boys would test one another to cross the pipe. Sort of an initiation kind of thing, see how far you could go. We usually could go all the way across. Now keep in mind that pipe goes well over 3 stories high. It's also pretty wide. I'd say as wide as an average car. We would walk this thing for kicks in big groups early in the morning, so one night me and a small group of friends were driving around bored at 2 in the morning, wanting to spook each other, so I said, let's go to Paradise and walk the pipe. As most of the friends I was hanging out with had never done it like I had. They agreed. They were pumped up on energy drinks, and we started driving there. It was pretty quiet. The sky was dark and the night was cold. And we got to the place and one of the kids didn't want to go. Said his parents were very traditional and he just wanted to chill in the car. He probably just wanted to text some girl, I'm sure. I told him it's fine, keep the car locked and running in case we see something scary. Me and the other boys went on without him. As we got onto the pipe, a few of the guys were scared and had me take the lead. As we crawled, I'd say 1/4 of the way up the pipe talking and laughing, I noticed a faint white or light gray bat bigger than my head flying around us. It dived for us a few times. We dodged it at first, but one of the kids slipped and almost fell off of the pipe. I reached out to him, grabbing his right arm. One of the kids grabbed him by the shirt collar, and another one grabbed his other arm. All together, we got back on the pipe shaken that we'd almost lost our friend to the dark depths below, but at least the bat was gone. We were a little freaked out, but the guys wanted to continue. We laughed about it as guys usually do. We passed the halfway point on the pipe with no problems, but as we continued, one boy, Michael, saw something. At the end of the pipe, there's a hill. Behind that hill, it is very brightly lit because of a church somewhere off in the distance. But on that hill, there was a black figure with pointy ears, kind of like the silhouette of a dog. Now, Michael was a tough guy, so he yelled at the thing, saying, "I'm not scared of you." He even tossed a few rocks he had in his pocket. One of the rocks hit the pipe and the others fell into the brush below. The shadowy silhouette stood up on 2 legs, like a human. We all freaked out, jaws dropped. Then someone pointed, saying, "Look, there's another one to the left, and another one to the right." So 3 silhouettes of pointy dog-eared people on the hill. I told everyone to back up so we could get back to the car. The things to the right and the left of the hill started to move down, towards us. Now there was just one standing guard on the top of the hill, the one who had first stood up. We were trying to hurry back, but we had come so down the pipe in complete darkness it wasn't going to be quick. There was silence for a few minutes. Then we heard a girl crying. It sounded like she was hurt and scared, almost in pain. We were overcome with a strange feeling of wanting to help. Michael wanted to go back towards the end and crawl down and help this girl. I almost followed too, but inside I was like, no, this is wrong. Something isn't right. I yelled at him and everyone, telling them they're stupid. Telling them, look up there, on that hill. Do you not see what those things are? This is a trap. That crying has to be fake. If there's a girl hurt, we'll come back when the sun's up in a couple hours and check. Now, the moment I said this, the crying stopped. All the guys freaked out. They can't believe what came over them. They said they'd almost forgot what we saw before. Halfway up the pipe now, we started to hear a native drum being played. We started running on top of the pipe to get to the car. Corey stopped us. We can all hear it under our feet. It sounds like a pack of snarling and growling, yelping coyotes. It's pitch dark below, but we know they're under us. So we run full speed, not looking back, straight to the car. We jumped in and started yelling and took off, hauling ass down that dirt road back to a well-lit gas station. We explained what happened to her driver, and we couldn't get the girls crying out of our head. We did go back in daylight, just to make sure, but we didn't find a girl. Instead, in that area where we had heard the crying, we saw a coyote watching us a close distance away. It wasn't shy, it just looked at us for a few seconds and walked off into the brush. I never went back there after that. My particular neck of the woods is hilly. I lived deep in the countryside with my father, who was stricken with frequent seizures and unable to work or even live alone. My story takes place during the autumn of 2014. I was a 26-year-old college dropout at the time and working part-time jobs at a gas station. Thanks to this, I had a lot of free time on my hands, most of which was spent hiking in the woods surrounding my home. On one of my many solo hikes, I saw something that has changed me. As I stated before, the season had just changed to autumn and trees were starting to change into the many brilliant shades that time of year is known for. I had decided after one of my shifts at work to go get one last extended hike in before the cold started in for the year. I left the house around 2:30 p.m. and told my dad I'd be back around 7 for dinner. Warm sun, but with a cooling breeze and remarkably low humidity. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. Perfect weather for a hike. I had been walking alongside a creek using a large branch turned into a makeshift walking stick. I was going my usual route for around 45 minutes when I realized the woods were quiet. Way too quiet. I stopped to listen, and aside from the running water to my right, there was not a sound in the forest. After shuddering from a cold chill I attributed to a breeze that had cut through the trees, I continued my trek, trying my best to match the silence of the woods with each step. Another 45 to 60 minutes passed, and my trail separated from the creek and began to loop back around towards my house. I had always dreaded the part of the hike due to the steep hills that laid out before me. I stopped to take a breather. After resuming my hike, I made it nearly 3/4 of the way through when I felt a strong wind at my back, and then a loud crack somewhere in front of me. About 40 yards ahead of me, and about 15 yards to the right, a young white-tailed buck stood alert, but unaware of my presence. After a few seconds of taking in the beauty of the creature, I noticed the wind was still blowing, and thought it was strange that the buck hadn't noticed me. I had always heard that being upwind of a deer would ensure you'd be noticed and the beast would flee. Shrugging it off, I continued walking, taking care to remain silent as to avoid spooking the buck. After walking about 15 yards, I noticed movement in the direction of the deer. Looking, I noticed he was no longer alert and had began walking slowly through the brush. I noticed something else as well. The deer was now about 30 yards away from me, but in between us, close to the ground, there was a pitch black mass moving under the cover of the foliage. It was much closer to the buck than to me and was approaching him. He had yet to notice it. I froze for a moment, waiting to see what the strange creature was, as coyotes are the only common predator around here. And this was much too large and too dark in coloration to be one of those. After the distance between the two forest dwellers shrunk to what could have been no more than 10 yards, the hidden beast stopped, and with it the wind. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. The deer suddenly looked directly at me, and flinched as if it were going to sprint away. But before it could take so much as a step, a large, black-like cat creature lunged at it, and instantly took the deer to the ground. While shocked at the appearance of this foreign predator, I remembered there had been stories and eyewitness reports going around for the past couple of years of a large black mountain lion roaming the hills in my county. I could no longer see the animals through the brush, but I didn't need to see to know what it looked like. Quietly, I continued along my path, wanting to avoid disturbing the feasting feline. As I walked along, I realized I was getting a clearer view of the animal. It was bigger than I had expected, having only seen them on television and books, and the color was mesmerizing, a deeper black than anything I'd seen, almost as if it was pulling the light towards it, never to escape. I stopped to marvel at the creature. As I did, it began eating. I felt bad for the deer, but this was the circle of life and all. What felt like minutes, but couldn't have been more than a few seconds passed, and I was hit with the horrid smell that I attributed to the dead deer. That's when I noticed the cougar wasn't black all over. Its face and hands were the typical color, aside from being covered in blood. But wait a minute. Hands. Why did it have hands where paws should have been? I began to study the creature more. Features, which just seconds before were that of a large cat, were becoming human-like before my eyes. What was once a black cougar or mountain lion was now a large bulky man with long black hair and covered in black furs for clothing, eating a freshly killed deer raw with only his hands, nails, and teeth. I couldn't help but let out a quiet gasp. But it wasn't quiet enough. The man stopped his meal but didn't move for a few moments. I knew I had to get out of there, but I didn't want him to be able to follow me home. He hadn't looked in my direction yet, and he was beginning to stand. Without thinking, I launched the stick I had been using to aid my hike back down the path in the direction I came from. After hearing the crash, the man sunk back down and began creeping in that direction, becoming a cat yet again as he moved. Taking my eyes off of him as little as possible, as fast as I could without making noise, I continued along the path. Once I felt like I was far enough away, I broke into a sprint and didn't stop until I was through my back door. I haven't seen that man or the cat since, but I quickly convinced my dad to move to a new town and haven't been back to those woods, so who knows if it's still skulking around there. I knew about skinwalkers before my encounter, but the thought didn't cross my mind until a few months ago when I was retelling the story to a younger cousin at a Halloween party to scare them. I've always been the paranoid type. If I hear a noise in the dark, I'd jump to the conclusion that it was something there that was here to hurt me. But what I experienced in June 2017 will never leave my memory. I've never done drugs or had any type of alcohol and continue to keep it that way. But me, my two brothers, and my parents all decided to move away from our old town after my uncle had just died, to start fresh. We had found a nice 5-bedroom house that would fit all of us. It was surrounded by woods and was always quiet. The nearest neighbor was about 90 meters away. The second week of us moving, me and my bigger brother Brandon decided to go to a creek that we had found the first day of us moving in. We followed the path that we had made from prior visits into these woods and reached the creek. It was a nice little creek. Occasionally, you could see some fish swim by, but not today. The creek didn't seem right. It was quiet. No birds chirping, nothing. Just the sound of the water calmly flowing. I could tell my brother was getting as scared as I was, so I suggested we leave. But him being the big brother who was never scared, he said that we should stay a while, but I am pretty sure he didn't really want to. It had only been a couple of minutes when we started to smell something so awful I can't even imagine what it could be. Rotten meat that had been left out in the heat and sprayed by a skunk. We started to get creeped out and finally decided to leave. As we started to head down the trail, my brother stopped to pee. He had walked no more than 10 meters behind a bush to take care of his business when I heard a scratching sound behind me. I turned to see what was making this strange noise and was met with the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. A tall, almost 10-foot figure stood between me and a tree about 5 meters away, poking half of its body from the tree looking at me. It had pale white skin, dog-like ears, and patches of fur scattered all over its body. The thing that scared me the most, it was whispering my name. Justin. It kept repeating my name. I screamed louder than I've ever screamed, but my brother ran to my side, and when he seen this thing, he just grabbed my arm and started running with me. We didn't look back. We slammed open the door to our house, screaming and babbling. Our parents rushed over to us and asked what was wrong. I was trying to explain it, what had just happened, but I couldn't. My brother was just quiet and was staring out of the living room window. My parents checked what he was looking at and could finally figure out what happened. And instead of grabbing the shotgun we had next to the fireplace, my dad said to run to the car, and we left as fast as we could. Since that encounter, we have called the police, and they didn't even seem like they thought we were crazy. They actually believed us and did a scan of those woods, but nothing was uncovered. We never moved out of that house, and I've never touched a tree belonging to those woods since. I made friends in my new location a few months later and told them this story. They didn't seem to have a clue about what it was until I asked my friend Adam, and he said one word: Skinwalker. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed these stories today. So if you did, be sure to drop this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We've got a lot more videos coming up, so stay tuned.